I'm Kattina.
And I'm Ellen Peguero.
Welcome to another episode of
A Good Show.
And still on with us discussing crime, intervention as a solution is Mr. Michael Myles. At the end of our last segment, we were discussing how the crime spree in 2011 had led to a disproportionate call for more policing, more gun control and all the rest of it, which was contrary to what the Yolanda Forde report had recommended, which was early childhood intervention. But Michael, the Yolanda Forde report is only one of many reports.
What, 15?
There have been a plethora of reports since then. Has government acted on any of them?
No one have taken ownership of it. You know, the report that was commissioned in 2001, Dr. Frank actually commissioned that report, right? That was the very first report that I was somewhat a part of, and that's one of the main reasons why he restructured Bonaventure and Francis Borden. He also privatized it because it became a political football, because he felt that that's where a lot of our kids were getting into crime. We were warehousing them. The moment that they came out, they were back involved in crime because we had not actually provided them any interventions. Fast forward I came back in 2010. About a year prior to that, I was in deep conversations with several members of the incoming UDP party, Mr. Ralston Anglin, Mr. Mark Scotland, and I think Mr. Bush was also somewhat part of these conversations. I was living in the US at the time, and one of the things that they wanted to do was, and the same thing, we were having loads and loads of young people at the time get involved in a lot of, criminal behavior. When I came back, I was placed, I wanted to work in the ministerial level because I felt that if I was going back into the department, I would go back into being frustrated, being blocked, and I would have no help in doing this. So when I came in and I was placed in education, I was a new sort of program was put in place, and it was, helping at-risk youth. I was an at-risk coordinator. They created the position for me. Another thing that happened was I would be in loads of different meetings, and I kept on hearing people talk about at-risk kids. We need to do something for those at-risk kids. Everyone were talking about the Yolanda Forde report, of course. No one was talking about reports that had already been written past that time, and and who was going to own that sort of stuff. One of the first things that I did was I wanted to get into the public schools. So I was placed in the Ministry of Education, but I worked across departments and I worked across ministries, trying to ensure that my responsibility for education, loads of different departments were really touching these kids, but no one were actually talking together. There was no join up support, right? The first thing that we did, that I did in education, certainly with Ralston's blessing, was we needed to come up with how many at-risk youngsters that we had. We needed to put names and faces together because we were sitting down in rooms and we were making all of these assumptions on helping these folks. But no one actually said, hey, okay, I'm going to help Michael Myles because Michael Myles is dealing with X, Y, and Z. It took me about 6 months or so. I went into all public schools. We identified every child who had met 5 or 6 levels of being at risk, from being at risk in their families, which means that they had a parent whether that was struggling with a drug habit or a mental health issue, or a parent that was in the prison system. Many of these youngsters that we had identified had learning issues or mental health issues, diagnosed and undiagnosed. They were already part of the criminal justice system or had already started to create things like petty theft and crime that were not caught. We also had a level in there for mental health and drug, alcohol, and so forth. So there was about 5 or 6 things that when we went in and we identified, and I worked with the schools, I worked with the educational psychologists, the school counselor, I worked with the police department, social workers, I worked with everybody across a wide spectrum. So when we identified all of these young people, We then developed a program called BEST, the behavior and the BEST stand for the behavior and education support teams. BEST comprise of a cross section of organizations: police, education, social services, and folks like me from the ministry as well. We also invited folks from the health services department. When we sat down as a team around a table at, let's say, Georgetown Primary School, we had all of the players around that table. And what we were able to do was address each child from different points of view. What we didn't understand, Pastor Peguero, is that the police had critical information that the social worker needed to know. And without the police being not being at that meeting, no one knew that the night before there was a raid at that 6-year-old's house. And the police, absolutely, and the police arrested their dad or mom, and the child walked into school with no lunch, no breakfast, right?
Traumatized,
none of that, right? So that was the main reason why we put BEST together. Another program that we brought into place was the extended after school program, where what you were familiar with, Tina, back in the day. I started the extended after school program because one of the main complaints from parents were, I do not know where my child is when they get out of school at 3 o'clock. Right. Now, I grew up in an after school program, right? I grew up playing football. I was in an after school program. Coach Gilesimo ran that after school program. Monday through Friday, we were off the street. And it wasn't just me. It was dozens of young men and women that he had either at the annex or, at the time it was the Cayman Islands High School. We were off the street. So I raised the funds. The government didn't have the money. I wrote 300 companies in Cayman. We raised $200,000. And then that's where Ralston and Mark Scotland then said, okay, let's take $100,000 from each of our ministries and let's make sure we can get get the program off the ground.
Okay. So there was the monetary investment in the EASP program.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about Youth Act that came along back in 2016.
Yeah.
Because Youth Act stood for Anti-Crime Trust.
Correct. So here's how Youth Act came along, right? I went to the government in 2013-14 sent me, and it was a group of us. They sent us off to Canada to look at youth intervention, early intervention programs. There were several programs that we saw in Canada. And like I said, I was dealing with it from an education standpoint of early intervention. They also sent folks from the prison system there. They sent people from probation and parole. They sent people from the court system. I was introduced to a program called S2Ep, Stop Now and Plan. S2Ep was, at the time, was like a 20-something year best practice program. And what they saw, what their research said to them was, we have between ages 6 and ages 12 to provide an early intervention. Anything beyond that, the child will enter the criminal element.
Exactly, yes.
Well, I had been looking for a program like S2Ep because I wanted to bring S2Ep back because, one, it was best practice and it was thoroughly researched. And it had actually, if you administer the program the way that they asked you to administer the program, there was success. So the majority of our young people that we saw going into crime started from 6, 7, 8 years old. We needed this program. And that's how Youth Act started, because I couldn't get the program implemented. When I came back and tried to get that through government, I couldn't get it implemented.
Sorry, sis. SNAP's approach to SNAP's approach to prevention and intervention in criminal activity was a two-pronged approach, as you spoke about earlier, treating not just the child,
the family,
but the family as well, because the family is also in treatment and understanding how the family needs to operate and how the family needs to operate with the child.
Absolutely.
And the child is in treatment, understanding how the child must also operate as an individual and in socializing with other individuals, both in the home, in the school, and in the environment.
Absolutely.
What happened to that?
S2Ep when I came back to try to get SNAP, no one would take it. The government didn't want to fund it. We needed to buy the license because SNAP is a licensed program. It is a best practice program. So Bonnie and I felt, I came back all excited. And of course, she was always there to say, okay, what are we going to do about this? And the minister didn't want to take it on. So we decided to build Youth Act. That's when Youth Act as an NPO came on board. Bonnie and I took on the role of implementing SNAP. I did the Rotary circuit, so I spoke to every Rotary club. I wrote grants and letters. Now, mind you, I was the at-risk coordinator for the government. And I was saying to them, this program is going to help us solve a lot of our problems that we're having currently in our primary school and also in our secondary schools. They didn't want to implement the program.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh, but because this is not funny.
Yeah.
But you are saying government didn't want to, didn't have the funding, but we have spent millions, and we continue to spend millions to incarcerate.
Yeah.
Okay, we continue.
Reports.
And on reports, and when the reports are done, they're filed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Something is wrong with this picture because here we are today in 2024 talking about issues from the 70s that had continued to escalate. Now we got about 3 generations in here that has reproduced after its own kind.
Absolutely. Right. At the time, trying to implement SNAP, we had visitors from the UK that brought in a program called the Crime Prevention Days. The ministry then contacted me. They wanted me to look at this program. And so they packed me up and they sent me all the way to Jersey off the Channel Islands and the UK to look at the Crime Prevention Days. I, myself, and a group of us, I think it was about 5 or 6 of us, including a former chief officer, also went with us. We fully assessed SNAP. We fully assessed the Crime Prevention Day. We felt that we could Caymanize that program. But we came back, and guess what happened?
No money.
We couldn't get it funded.
So then this is all about looking good. This is about, and I don't mean to ostracize any government, but this is about government looking good, that we're doing these things, but we're not implementing any programs, and we continue on this cycle. So where do we go from here? Because it is quite obvious that it has not gotten better. It has gotten worse. Let's not fool ourselves. It has gotten worse. Our young men, young women now is even have increased in the crime activity. Yeah. And we do have a problem, and we're still labeling these children in the school system in everywhere else as bad children. Correct. Not because now we got 3 generations that have come from total dysfunction. Yep. And we're still saying the way to handle this, the way to go about this is not after you paid all this money for the Yolanda Forde report. Yeah. Let's now spend a few more million over here and get more police officers. Yep.
Instead of investing.
Youth
Act folded because of lack of funding.
Right.
But let's talk a little bit about the Crime Prevention Days. Mm-hmm. Can we, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks.
So the when they sent me to Jersey and the UK to look at these programs, I was like, wow, this is phenomenal. And while they were not best practice particular programs because there was no research, the communities that they had impacted was phenomenal, because what they did was they went into schools and it became an education program, not just this scared straight program. Mm-hmm. Police, prison, therapists, mental health counselors. You had folks from the paramedics and healthcare, all of these departments. And this is what I loved about the Crime Prevention Days, was because it was joined up. They would go into schools and it became a seminar program. So youngsters would go from one seminar to the other seminar, mm-hmm. and they were informed about the decisions that they were making and how it's impacting not just them, but impacting their communities. But again, when we came back, we could not actually get the program in force because there was no consistent funding. So Bonnie and I went back to the board, and then we took it on the Youth Act and we funded it, right? I funded it out of my salary. She funded it out of hers. And we also did the Rotary Circuit again. We spoke to Kiwanis and all of the other nonprofits. And I wrote loads and loads of letters to all sorts of organizations. Youth Act folded because we said to the government, this is a government program. This is not done at CIS. It's not done at Prep or Catholic. It is done primarily in the public schools. The age groups that were targeted was grade 8 because research was done. Like I've told you, see what SNAP addresses? SNAP addresses that age group between 6 and 12.
Yes.
We noticed that young people started to kind of go off the rails because again, it's puberty, you know, it's ego, it's all of this sort of stuff that happens at 12, 13 years old. So we targeted the grade 8. Our plan was to ensure that we targeted grade 6. We wanted to put a crime prevention day in for grade 6. And we also wanted to put a crime prevention day in grade 10 because we felt that if a child got at least 3 sessions of this every year, we can actually reduce crime in the Cayman Islands. We also put seminars in there for guns, gangs. You know, Tina was also part of it because she spoke as an individual who was already in the system, you know, who had a son that was impacted in the system. We brought in guest speakers. It was phenomenal. I mean, when you see the operation that we put in place, it was an absolutely phenomenal operation because there were so many moving parts to this, right? There were at least 12 to 13 different departments all converging on a John Gray or Clifton Hunter in providing these kids with a very holistic view of all of their decisions, right?
Wow.
But again, we couldn't get it funded, and it was a major part of what the Yolanda Forde report asked for: community intervention, and that's what it was. Community policing, that's what it was. Again, I was also ushered off to, like, I went to Trinidad. Like I've told you, one of the reports that I contributed to quite a bit was the Pan American Health Youth Survey, which was done with almost 3,000 young people. That report was commissioned in 2013. It was then finalized in 2015. We kept it in we kept it under circulation for at least 2 years.
Whoa.
That report went into things like mental health, sexuality. It went into bullying. I mean, it taught us so much. That's 13 years ago. It gave us a whole slew of recommendations that had we had done that, we would have had the just overwhelming mental illness that we have here now. We would have addressed a lot of that and put the services in place.
Can you address as why it was put under the cover for 2 years?
We were having conversations, Pastor Piguero, not about the problem. We were having this conversation about this is the Cayman Islands and we don't have those issues. Right?
Yes.
Those are the conversations
I
that we consistently
it was a rhetorical
had,
question.
right?
So,
right?
Yes.
We were convincing ourselves
Yes.
that we didn't have a gang problem. Remember when it all came about, the politicians called it groups. Oh, well, you know, we don't have
I remember
people
that very
intelligent
well.
enough,
Yeah.
you know, to actually form these gangs.
And I want to say something to you. At the time when that remark was made by a politician that we don't have gangs, we have groups. At that time, it was a known fact. Yeah. God rest her soul in peace, Dr. Linda McField, who was also very much involved in all of this, traveling to New York, tracking youth who were part of the Crips group and all of this in New York that was happening here at the time. When are we going to stop burying our head in the sand? And I think this is not a government problem by themselves, though they carry a big role. The church, and as I said earlier, who is the church? It is each one of us.
The people.
It's the people. When and what doesn't happen in the Cayman Islands, it's going to get worse because we're painting this wonderful picture. This is paradise. And I want to say to you all, it's beautiful. I love paradise, but this is no longer paradise.
Well, I mean,
it is not.
The challenges that we're running into, right? They suspected that a lot of our social ills would have remained in Windsor Park or
Yes.
remained in the swamp or
Or
remained
Watlow
in
Road.
Rockhole or in those places or remained up in the
And
way
we could
backs
lock
of
ourselves
West
away
Bay
from
and East
them.
End. It's now happening on Main Street, right? You walk into any bank in Cayman, there's security everywhere. You walk into financial organizations, jewelry stores, grocery stores. It is all about security today. It's costing us, right? You know, Tina, you mentioned, you know, something earlier before we chatted. We're spending in our budget, when you look at things like prison, police, the judiciary, and all of the other sort of, you know, I kind of call them,
Incidental expenses
yeah,
as
you
a
know, like
result of criminal activity.
it's over $200 million in our $1 billion budget, right? So could you imagine if we can save $200 million where we can reduce crime? We can say to a 7-year-old, okay, I now know that you have a mental health issue. I'm going to ensure that you have health insurance and that your parents understand. I'm going to make sure that in the school system, you are going to receive the level of interventions that you need to get through to grade 12. If we can do that, then we save that $200 million, right? We or drastically reduce that. When we look at a lot of things of what we call interventions today, they don't cost a lot of money. I mean, I will say this as well.
Sorry, what they do cost is the
Time.
will.
Absolutely.
The will to
Absolutely.
invest. But I apologize for interrupting you there.
No, I
Continue
you know,
on.
one of the programs when I left government in late in early 2017, I think for me the sort of straw that broke the camel back for me. I started doing research. I tracked about 180 students that had came through our youth court system. So I used to go to youth court to represent education because
Right.
kids would just go missing from our education system and nobody would know where they were in the prison system, right? They would just go missing. They would be sentenced in either with an adult or they'd be sentenced in youth court and they would go to prison or they would end up at Bonaventure. And because in government, very few organizations talk to each other, the kid would just go missing. So I started going to youth court to represent education and at least report back to them on which of those kids. So I started tracking all of the kids. I spent 2 years tracking all of these kids. And one of the things that came out of that was I noticed that the moment that a youngster was arrested, entered the criminal setting, it was the first step into Northwood Prison. So I started tracking them in the adult court. So these are kids that were 17, 18, 19 years old that had committed crimes as juveniles. They were now committing adult crimes, right? I went back to the ministry. I did a complete comprehensive report. I was also sent overseas again to look at more programs.
Oh,
the one
yes.
program that I brought back was a program called the Diversion Program. The program was all, and at the time, our gang problems were flaring up. We had brought in a gang specialist from Canada. We had also brought one in from Florida. And they all told us that diversion programs work. And here's how the diversion program worked. Instead of sentencing, if a child, let's say a child is caught for petty theft, instead of prosecuting that child, because here's what happens when you prosecute that child for theft. So the child is automatically suspended. Many of them are suspended from school.
Yes.
Right? They then end up with a police is now involved. Once the police gets involved and does a case, the case is sent to a prosecutor is now involved. The child now have to get a legal aid, an attorney, so the state pays for that. A social worker is appointed to the case. A judge is appointed to the case. You see how many civil servants that we're paying for one theft?
For one
Right?
theft.
Yes.
So I put a comprehensive program in place. I told them how we can do this. It would have cost the government $0. I said, okay, here's what I believe we need to do. I went and I met with the commissioner of police and all of their folks. And I said, listen, we need to delay charging the kid. If they had, I said to them, tell me specific charges that we can delay for at least 3 months, 3 to 6 months. And they gave me a list of thefts that our youngsters were actually committing, that they can actually delay those until we can get the mental health support, the drug and alcohol support, the family intervention support. those supports became the nucleus of the diversion program. Instead of incarcerating or putting the kid in
Correct.
actual
Yes.
court, we would divert that kid into counseling,
Yes. Yes.
therapy. We would divert the kid into an after-school program, a sports program, a youth program, a church program. We could divert the kid into mentoring, coaching, all of that sort of
And what
stuff.
you're
We
doing
can
is
divert the kids.
diverting that child from future crimes.
And it
Absolutely.
costs
From future crime. And it costs
a whole lot
Nothing.
less.
Zero.
Yes.
Because
Zero.
we had all the programs.
Yeah.
And you know what they said? Now we can't do that.
I don't understand why were you being kept sending off to all these wonderful programs or in and coming back with all of these things again and being put on the shelf?
Because I think we value the idea, Pastor Peguero, of saying that as long as, similar like my position, as long as we had a Michael Myles in that position, they felt that it was an intervention. They felt that they were actually doing something. That's like when they commissioned all these reports, it wasn't actually about doing something. They felt that this was actually the intervention. The report was the intervention. It wasn't the action behind the report, right? And that's one of the things that they did. Like politicians like to brag, well, we sent someone to X, Y, and Z to find out more about that, but they never actually listened to the recommendations.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
None of these recommendations are mine. All of these reports were written by folks we brought in or people that we paid within Cayman that either worked for government or worked outside government to put these reports together. They were not Michael Myles saying this. What I was trying to do is look at the reports and gauge in which of these programs, one, I can fundraise for, and it was the extended after school program, the diversion program, youth programs, sports programs, all of those programs we already had in Cayman. What I was trying to get them to understand is that we now needed a more targeted and focused approach. We do not need to put youngsters anymore in youth court or children's court, right? They actually could be diverted into something healthier. And let's avoid the police getting involved, because the moment the police gets involved, the kid is headed to prison.
That's it. Yes.
Now, Mike, in 2016, after the murder of Justin Manderson, I started a campaign called Let's Stop the Sorrow. And that was because being sober, I got to understand the ramifications, the ripple effect of gun violence and murder in the country a whole lot better. And not only do you have the family who grieves the loss of that individual, but every one of us in society feels it. We feel the fear, we feel the sense of loss, we feel the anger, we feel all of the negative emotions that comes up as a result of that event. But we also have a fear for our future as well. Now, on the other side of that, I have always read some incredibly wicked comments that has come up on these articles on the websites when they run stories on gun violence and murder and stuff. And some of those comments were about, were comments such as, oh, leave them alone and let them all kill themselves off. Oh, they're not good in a way, so the quicker the better, and so on and so forth. What happened when those people were advocating? Because let me tell you really what that was. That was inciting violence, inciting murder.
Of course.
Those persons, their IP address should have been gathered by the RCIPS from the website owner, and those people should have been charged for murder, for inciting murder. All right? But when they were saying that, they never thought that they would be sitting, that they could possibly be sitting, that they could be out, that it could be at Popeyes, that it could be at 8 Stadium
Yes.
when it happened. All right? And now we have something like the 8 Stadium shooting happening in the community, and a reward being offered to $250,000 altogether. Right? For information on one event. Now, I am not saying that it is not worth it, and I am not saying that the shooters had a right to do it or anything of the sort. What I am saying is, for decades, this country knew, because they had commissioned the reports themselves, and this country knew that they could not invest in policing, cannot invest in laws. You had to invest in intervention programs. They paid for these reports.
Yeah.
In 2016, in the Let's Stop the Sorrow campaign, I said, if you're thinking that you can keep pumping money into the judicial service to lock young men away, and then this will somehow, in your belief, bring and maintain peace and safety personal to you, then you are a fool.
Yeah.
A tree grows from its roots, not from its leaves. You must start addressing the myriad problems that are associated with crime in this country. Now, on the 4th of March this year, following the 8 Bush shooting, you did an article with the Cayman Compass as well.
Yeah.
And in that article, you said, a far greater focus is needed on intervening in the often chaotic family lives of troubled young people who end up in gangs.
Yeah.
If enough resources were invested in ensuring they graduated school as stable individuals with qualifications and a trade that could make them a living wage, government would save money on catching, prosecuting, and imprisoning those people after they have committed a crime. And that you still insist on even today. It is better to invest $250,000 in prevention programs. And let me encourage government from right now. Invested in Inspired Training Cayman. Not because I know Michael personally, but because I know that Michael is capable of investing $250,000 into the proper programming and the proper vocational training, and his history, his employment history, and his outcomes working with the government are proof of themselves. If you need to find a program, or you believe that you have to find a program, let me shorten that for you. Invest it in Inspire Training Cayman. And I want to say this to the rest of the community. The young men who are caught up in crime, in gun activity, in the warfare in this country, they are our children. They are our sons. Regardless of what it is that's going through their minds, and I believe it is driven by fear more than anything else, they are ours. And we have a responsibility, especially as mothers in this country, to come to the front line and say, I want to help our children, our sons, our young men into a better life, for them to be able to put down the guns. And like I said back in 2016, they may never become best friends, but they may get to a point where they can bounce each other and walk away without having to draw a gun one on the other. And is it possible? Yes,
very
it
much.
is.
It is. I mean, we're seeing it. We're absolutely seeing it. You know, I was looking on the ESO website, and in 2022, we had 22 juveniles who've committed 74 crimes. 2021, we had 18 juveniles who committed 44 crimes. 2020, 16 juveniles who committed 45 crimes. So when you look at how these youngsters are committing crimes in Cayman, you know, you were talking about 22 kids, you're talking about 5 or 6 crimes per child. Right? That's committing crimes. And if there's not levels of intervention, this is where gangs come in. This is where teenage pregnancy comes in. You know, this is where unhealthy lives come in. This is where, you know, folks start to get into where their fathers are not involved because they're in prison, or they're out on the street, or moms are having multiple kids. At Inspire, you know, we've changed the game. We've put in so many different parts. When I started Inspire 5 years ago, we were just a Tibet center. Today, we're all about workforce development. I have a therapist on staff. I don't have to, but unless I can ensure that people are living healthier lives, I can't get them employed. Exactly. See, people think that you could just open up a Tibet center and everybody's just going to get employment. That's not how it works. When a young mom don't have childcare, or don't have clothes or shoes, or she has been abused for so long and for so many years, it doesn't matter how much skills that she have, right? She's not actually going to get the level of work that she needs in order to, you know, ensure that her family is taken care of. Same thing with young men. We see it all the time. I have kids, young men coming in all the time. They've had 5 or 6 jobs by the time that they've gotten to me. Well, why haven't you got keeping a job? Drug abuse, mental health issues, and it's just a lot of things. Or they are food deprived. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from. I'm now dealing with loads of homelessness.
Yes.
So they want employment, but I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight.
I wonder if we really realize the problem that we are in this little island.
I think that they do. I've been in too many circles that people know what we are dealing with. I think, again, they think that their $1 billion budget is going to just solve this, right? And when that shooting happened, we are now been put on the world stage. So people are going to start saying, okay, well, if that level of crime is happening in your community, I'm going to go to Turks and Caicos, or I'm going to go to this place. And that $1 billion that they're planning for, that's going to look a lot like 500 million before it's all said and done. And that's going to disrupt major things in our government, in our country. It's going to affect community programs, right? I don't wish on anything like that, but unless we are actually putting in a strategy, the strategy simply cannot be, we need police. I am not here saying we don't need police.
We do, right? But that's not the answer.
We need police enforcement, but that's not the 100% of it, right? That's probably 20% of it. Because the guy that's holding the gun, yes, we need a police officer or police presence to ensure that that doesn't happen. I'm trying to get him before he actually picks up the gun.
That's right.
That's how I would like to work with him. I need to get him from 12, 11, 10 years old, so at least I can convince him that he don't really need the gun, right? I need to get the young lady before she starts thinking about sex to let her see how phenomenal she is. That's the stuff that we're not actually talking about, right?
And that is the answer. And that is the answer.
So that's what the Forde report and all of the multitude of reports. When you look at all of the recommendations, Kattina, all of them say the exact same thing. Right? They've just borrowed from one to the other.
Because, sorry, this could go on.
Yeah.
So, Michael, it's been wonderful having you with us here again today. And if any of you would like more information about Inspire Training Cayman, you can visit the website at www.inspirecaymantraining.com. Michael, what's your telephone number?
939-1301. Or they can email us at info@inspirecaymantraining.com.
Just for the record, this show was not done for promotional purposes for Inspire Cayman. It was done so that we can get the point across to you that intervention is the solution.
Absolutely.
And so we have proposed to you to invest in Inspire Cayman.
All of our funds go right back into our people. My wife and I fund Inspire out of our own pockets. So, I mean, we've only just started, young people were only started maybe in November, starting to get scholarships from the Ministry of Education. Just in November. Before that, work has been given scholarships, but it's not enough to run my organization. The things that what we are doing are ensuring that they're equipped for something more than work, right? I don't have to have a therapist on staff, but we do. I don't have to place anybody in any employment. I'm a TVET center. I could say, I've given you the service, now run along. But we know that unless we help them reduce or eradicate some of the challenges, some of the social issues that they're having, they're never going to get employment.
Well, like we said, like Kattina said, this is not to promote youth inspired, but I think we need to promote it because we have a solution right here at home. We have one. We have it with someone who is knowledgeable, understand the issues. You have the training. You have all it. So I would today just ask us all as a community and as a government, let's work with the program that we have here because for sure intervention is the solution to our problems. We can no longer bury our heads in the sand and think that this problem is going to go away. We need to intervene. And I really not only pray, but I would like to see how I can do my part in helping, because this isn't going to get any better
not.
if we don't do something and do it now.
Yeah.
You said something there just now that I shared with a friend just recently after this the 8 Bush shooting. I said, listen, what they're planning on and building this paradise, people are watching it.
Yeah.
And they're going to begin to look elsewhere.
Yeah.
You know, and they're going to go to same places. I named the same country. I said places like Turks and Caicos.
Yeah.
But again, if Turks and Caicos don't do what they got to do, it's just a matter of time before it comes back to them.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to just say this in closing. We need, and I say this without reservations, as a people, we need to get over the fact that we cannot honor our own homegrown, well-grounded individuals like Michael Myles. You know, I said to you earlier before we start, Jesus himself said a prophet will honor his own hometown. We need to stop looking at who it is and look at what can be done to help us as a community on a whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amen.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
Mike, there's still so much more to be said on this topic. You're going to have to come on.
Absolutely.
Again,
I mean, you tell me when, you know, I mean, I can, you know, give more time to this because I'm passionate about this and I think it's a worthwhile opportunity for us and for our people to know that things are being done. It's not unique to me. I am a very small spoke in the wheel, but I want to stay part of the wheel for as long as I can. My mother is aging in our country and I want to make sure I can protect her. I have 4 daughters that's going to be residing here. All of my family is here. I am going to be here. My wife is here. So I have to ensure that I'm contributing to make Cayman safe, to make our youth feel that people do love them and people do care. So, you know, I would take this opportunity, Pastor Peguera, come on by. I mean, you know, see what we have. I mean, we've built something on more than just a TVET center. We've built something on hope, right? I sell hope. I don't sell just training programs, right? You know, like I sell God, right?
Amen.
Like that's been my mission, right? I sell God as well. So, you know, it's built on something more because I can tell you if I was only doing TVET, I would walk away a long time ago because TVET just putting in a training program isn't helping our people. We have to go further.
So, Mike, before I have to explain to all of the judges and the condemners and everything what I sell God actually means.
Yes, I was going to say that. Yes.
But anyway,
I was going to say.
Thank you so very much for joining us for this episode of A Good Show. Join us again next week, Sunday at 7 p.m. for another episode of A Good Show. And of course, Michael will join us again for a further discussion on the topic of intervention into criminal activity.
You can join us on Cayman Life TV, Logic 33, on Sundays and Tuesdays at 7 p.m.
God bless you.
A Good Show is brought to you by the kind donations of private sponsors like yourselves and the support of companies such as Media Warehouse, 7 Miles of Grace, H. Philippi Bank's Attorney at Law, Dragonfly Cayman, and others. To become a sponsor, an advertiser, or to make a donation, email agoodshow@christian.ky.